Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the very exciting Women Empowerment Panel. And I'll start with introducing Anshu. She requested for a short introduction. So here it goes. She is the co-founder and CEO of Nimbella, a cloud infrastructure startup. And she's an alum of IIT Roorkee. With this, I'll hand over to Anshu, who will introduce the rest of the panel. Go ahead, Anshu.
Thank you, Ishita. Can you hear me well? All right. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm hoping more people would show up as the panel progresses, but thank you for coming on time. When I was asked to do this panel, I was reminded of a story from over 20 years ago. I was newly married, and like every couple, me and my husband were arguing when my brother-in-law sat us down and said that we don't have any arguments. And I asked, why, how? And he said that I don't interfere in small matters, and your sister doesn't interfere in big matters, okay? And the small matters being, where would the kids go to school? Where would they buy a house? How much they're going to spend? All the matters. And the big matters being, who would be the prime minister? What would be the fiscal policy? And what would be the financial policy of the country? So there we are, okay? The reason I'm telling you this story is that women empowerment is actually a pretty wide topic. It's social, economic, political, and we can't tackle all part here. So we will do what we can, which is look at in our backyard and see what we can do for our backyard, which is women in tech. So our focus is going to be on women in tech, all right? So, and in case you're wondering if I have achieved that level of empowerment at home, I'm sad to report I haven't, but I haven't given up. One of these days I will, okay? All right, with that, I will introduce my panelists here. So I have Kumar Vora. Kumar is the VP GM of Adobe's cloud business. And prior to Adobe, he was the CEO of Acrolins. He is from, he did his BTech from IIT Bombay. I have Smita Hashim. She is the Director of Product Management at Google. She got her BTech from IIT Kanpur. She has a passion for diversity and is a founder of IITK alumna group. So if you are from IITK and you are not part of her group, please join, okay? And then I have Dr. Bikash Kohli. Bikash is the CTO and EVP of Juniper Networks. Prior to Juniper, Bikash spent 10 years at Google, and Bikash got his BTech from IIT Kharagpur. So we have a mix of IITs here. All right. So the first question I have is for the entire panel, a little twist to the question for Smita. Okay, so what has your personal experience over the years been with women empowerment and workplace? And for Smita, your journey as a woman, and for Bikash and Kumar as allies, okay? So, Kumar?
Yeah, I've been in the industry in Silicon Valley for 30 plus years now, and it's amazing how many things have changed in terms of our attitude towards this topic. 30 years ago, this topic was rarely even discussed or brought up. And the sexism in workplace was rampant, and it was almost accepted. And today, there are more and more conversations about this and the opportunities to address a lot of the things that just did not take place. We have evolved quite a lot. But at the same time, I have to keep emphasizing to my peers and everybody I talk to about this topic anytime, is that we may have come a long way, but we have definitely not reached anywhere near the destination of what the stable equilibrium should look like. We have long ways to go in order to attain either equality or equal empowerment. Whichever way you look at this, there are many phrases you can use for this topic. Any which way you look at it, there is an imbalance in the ecosystem right now. So that's been my experience.
All right. How about you, Smita?
Yes, Anshu, and I'll take a very personal lens to it, being a woman, as you are asking. So I went to IIT, and you go to IIT, and your world changes. Suddenly, you're the only woman all the time. And it trains you well, and then you step out, and I went to grad school, and then I started work, and I continued to be the only woman. But I didn't go around thinking that, hey, I'm the only woman. You know, I just went about, and I tried to do the best I could. I brute forced my way into my career, and it's turned out pretty well. But in retrospect, when I look back, I can start connecting the dots. And I would say there are some things which really stand out. So there were individuals who in very early days just reached out to me and helped me. So an example was my thesis advisor, Alan Gershow. And before I was graduating, he said, I want to do a mock interview with you. And he did that unprompted. And I went, and he showed me how to do a firm American handshake. So I would say, like, he took a tremendous risk. He reached out to a female student, and he said, I want to teach you something. Or I had a manager at Microsoft who said, I had a young child, and people, it's kind of a sexist place. And he said, no, I believe she can carry good scope. I'm going to give it to her and give her the room. So those were the individuals who mattered. And then when I went on to Google, where I have been for 13 years, I had the fantastic experience to work for Susan Wojcicki, and she's currently the CEO of YouTube. And Susan, to me, was this amazing leader. She already had 3 children. Now she has 5, and Susan ran this wonderful workplace. It was very effective, it was very empathetic, and she really showed me how you could be a leader, be very diverse, and really achieve great results. So those are the things which jump out to me, like the people who stretched out and helped me, people who showed by example what can be done. I do think the conversation is much broader now, and that is great to see. But seeing those things, we can put those in practice, and I'm glad to see the conversation broadening, but a lot more is needed.
So, I agree with everything that you guys have said. That this is a topic that we take seriously at every company. But I think where we have a long way to go is turning that from a statistics conversation to turning that into how that empowered the companies. And one of the things that I've seen often, it's not a bad thing. Start from the interns and hire them. But that doesn't fundamentally change a company's composition until you have leaders, till you have role models. And I have a very personal experience of this. I said I was in Google before. I inherited a team where none of the leadership were women. And the hardest challenge that I had was to have the first one, that would be the role model for the others to come in. And once that happened, the floodgate opened after that, right? I don't think that conversation is actually happening everywhere. It is still a bit of a statistics conversation in many places. And till we turn that into, it's really in the advantage, it's really an advantage for the company or the organization or the university. I think till we get there, we have a long way to go.
Thank you, Vikash. So I also have a personal story. It's a little bit negative story, but I guess there should be some kind of negative stories also here. I was fundraising for my company last year, and I have been in 4 startups, but I had worked on somebody else's vision. I had never executed on my own vision, so this is my own company, okay? And I have a couple of other founders, but I was raising money. And I, like everyone else, I was knocking the doors of the VCs, and I had decided I'm going to only knock 10 doors, okay, and that's it. And I'm going to raise my money, okay? And I was the only girl in my IIT batch, IIT class also. So it's never really occurred to me that I would be looked at differently, okay? Because we all of us actually come from privileged families. We have had the luxury of educated parents. They have made us feel that you're one and the same. So when I started fundraising, I went to these VCs, some of them, and one of the questions that came up was, how old are your kids? How many male colleagues have been asked that question in their first meeting? I mean, can anybody tell me? There are not many male colleagues here, but not many, or never, okay? And if that question was benign, I would say, I'll chalk it out and I'll forget it. But that question was not benign, because the moment I said, and I'm old, so I have a 21-year-old and a 17-year-old, says, that's great. Okay, you wouldn't have to spend time at home much, and you wouldn't have. So you see, the point is, they kind of thought that I wouldn't be a good CEO, or I wouldn't give it all because I have children. So this is, you can call it an unconscious bias, you can call it whatever, but it is a problem. And that is and I had that, and I was really saddened because the VCs that asked me that question were mostly the Indian VCs. No other VCs asked me that. It was the Indian VCs who asked me that question, and it was just, it was disheartening. for me. But I was able to raise money, and my VCs are Indian VCs, so nothing against them. But that's my story, that how there is that bias that comes to. So my own personal experience. All right. So this is a more, I guess, provocative question in some ways, and it's a question for all of you with your own lens. Are we being condescending to women when we say that we need to empower them?
It's a very tricky topic. First of all, we have acknowledged on this panel, and I think the audience also would agree, that we have long ways to go. We have an issue of inequality where we are not at the equilibrium. Nobody talks about men's empowerment. I've not heard that phrase in a long time. So in a way, empowerment, the word has a connotation that somebody is empowering somebody else. In that sense, it is a condescending word, in my opinion. However, we have to make sure that we are also using it in the context of, it may sound condescending, but what is implied is that we are trying to create an equilibrium. So I think that there has to be a notion here that, yes, the phrasing has to be careful, but the biases are the inherent biases that we are trying to remove as a result of that is something that we should all be aspiring for. That's the way I think about this. And that was one of the topics I brought up when we were discussing this panel, which is empowering sounds like somebody else bestowing power to women. Women need to empower themselves to a degree as well, and then comes the removal of bias and all that conversation. But it is not a one-sided equation. It is not that women are not trying to self-empower, and therefore this inequality exists. That is not true at all in the first place.
Yeah, I think it is a tricky conversation. It's a tricky and it can come across as condescending, but I think it depends a lot on how you approach it. So one suggestion to also like women is that it's good to assume good intent. Sometimes, words are tricky to phrase, and if people are well-intentioned, give them the benefit of the doubt so they're not scared to speak up. So that's my advice as a woman to women. But I think it becomes condescending if you treat it as a statistic or something you have to do because someone put that chore on you. But if you treat it, as Pipesh is saying, you think about it as leading to better outcomes. You have access to a bigger talent pool. Your work group represents the work group of your user base, which is going to be diverse, at least for a lot of cases, then in that case, you approach it humbly. You say it as, I want to build the best team, I want to lead to the best outcomes, and I'm continuing to learn. Like as engineers, we all like to observe, learn, and iterate. Then I think it becomes a much more thoughtful conversation, which is geared towards the bottom line and improving your results. So which is mutually beneficial, and at that point, it's not condescending.
All of us need empowerment. All of us needed that at some point in our life, in our career, wherever. And you need empowerment before you have crossed the threshold of where either you yourself are capable of reaching your goal or network effect takes over. That there are enough in the network that can self-empower, and then you don't talk about empowerment anymore. This is not about, somebody strong asking for help at all. This is about crossing the threshold where the network effect takes over. And unfortunately, in most places that I have worked in, we haven't crossed that threshold. We're getting closer, and like you gave example of Suzanne, in Google, there are some great role models, right, that actually help others cross the threshold very easily. But then, whether something is condescending is absolutely a function of, what outcome you want. Like if the outcome is I'm empowering someone and therefore I'm great, absolutely condescending. If the outcome is that leads to better results for my company, my institution, my organization, society, then I don't think it's condescending. It's actually helping the network effect to happen, and otherwise it would not happen.
Yeah, it is, women empowerment should not be a feel-good topic.
No.
Yep.
Okay, and it should not be done because it just feels good. It just sounds politically right. It should be the right thing because it has the right results. Okay, so I actually agree, Kumar. What you said was women need to empower themselves. Okay, because I see it all the time now as I'm recruiting more and more. And I'm really cognizant of the fact that I do want women in the company, okay? So that may be a bias towards women, but I do have that in mind. And when I am trying to recruit, what I see is I have a job description out, I have 10 requirements, and women see and says, I meet 4 out of 10 requirements, okay? So I'm not going to apply, okay? And I see men who meet 2 out of 10 requirements, and I'm a fast learner. I'm going to learn, and I'm going to do fantastic at the job. Okay, that is the difference. Women themselves have to change a little bit. They need to first feel empowered themselves, and then they could expect empowerment from others. So when I put a job description out, I get 400 resumes, okay, total, out of which 10 are women. Okay, and when I call these women, and they're so apologetic, you know what, I don't meet all the requirements, but I hope I can do it. But this is our nature, and we need to change that.
I kind of like, so I would disagree a little bit. I think, yes, everyone needs to empower themselves, but there have been famous case studies done where they just change the name of the applicant on a resume and they send them out. I was on a panel for San Jose State University Women's Day, and the moderator there was from Stanford Claiborne Institute, and she said, at the psychology department, when they changed the name of the person, just the name of the person from a man to a woman, the woman was judged much more harshly. So I do think another thing which we have established through all these studies is women alone cannot empower themselves. Societal change needs to happen. We need to do things differently. So while I agree that women should be bolder, but I do think as women, even as they are being bolder, they run into a lot of roadblocks.
They need to be supported.
They need to be roadblocks,
system.
unconscious
Yes,
bias, all of those kind of things.
Absolutely right.
So.
Absolutely right. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
It's absolutely right. So I have specific questions based on your experiences. So Bikash, what do you think is the biggest hurdle here? Why are we not at a point where we don't have to talk about this? I would like this topic to never be on the agenda. So what do we have to do?
Yeah, first of all, if you look at the audience, I think it has changed a little bit, but we're mostly preaching to the choir. And if we keep on doing that, we're not going to make any changes, right, honestly. Those who look like me, they have to take it seriously. I think that's it, it starts there. And clearly we're not there, because, but I think, it goes broader. So I actually have had a lot of conversation with my leaders and so on and so forth. And I think it's a very personal view that whenever this topic comes up as some sort of a social equality thing, I think that's the wrong perspective, in my opinion. It has nothing to do with social equality. It had at some point, but I don't believe that's the reason. I'm a hardcore engineer. That's all I know. That's all I've done. And I always use sort of, engineering principles to things. If you have incomplete perspective and biased perspective, your probability of reaching the right conclusion or making the right decision is that much lower. And there have been a lot of studies, actual data that shows men and women are wired to think differently. Broad generalization, there has been this hunter-gatherer theory, but whatever the thing is, our left brain and right brains work differently. Our fast brain and slow brain work differently between men and women. And as a result, if you don't have perspective that comes from men and women, you are bound to have incomplete perspective. I've seen this over and over again in decision making. And chances are you're making wrong decision for your company, for your startup, for your organization, for your institution, right? So it's in the interest for your company or institution or organization, whatever hat you wear, that you have more representation. That does not mean it's 50-50. It's not about having equal number of men and women at all. It's about having empowered women that can make decision or influence your decision. And if you don't have that, you are not making right decisions most of the time. And I think till that conversation happens, and that unfortunately doesn't happen often. Till that conversation happens, we're not addressing the right problem. And that's why I sort of pointed out, it's not about statistics. That's the wrong metric, right? It's how many empowered leadership in whatever level women you have in your vicinity. That's how I feel about it.
Okay. Smita, you wanted to add something?
No, I think that's a great answer. I do agree that we have to step beyond and we have to, diversity matters. Diversity matters in terms of outcome. We will not clone a person to create a team, so So we need that diversity. And I actually think like one of the things is when I think of diversity, yes, women is a large group with some attributes, I would say, or some societal expectations. But diversity, I think, goes broader. So first generation, low income, gender diversity, racial diversity. There's a lot of different kinds of diversity which matters. So at least like when I think of diversity, or even at Google, like, when we think of diversity, we think of it as broader. And the more diverse you are, you'll have better outcomes. But women, of course, constitute 50% of the population, so it's an important group to think about.
I absolutely agree with you about the diversity point, which is it's not unidimensional.
Yeah.
It's not just about gender biases or diversity. It's not about the race and color. It's not about the income levels of aspirants. It's not about sexual preferences. It's all of the above, where you see inequality, where you see disparity, where you see the mix not being right. We need to address all of those issues. Today's topic is only unidimensional, but that's not the only topic.
It's a broad topic, yeah.
Okay, all right. So Smita, this is a specific question for you. And I personally don't like this question very much, but I think it's very important, is because there is an unequal responsibility between men and women. So how do you, in your personal life, and what would be your advice, how do you balance business success and short-term needs versus the practical needs of raising a family? Can we really do it all?
Yeah, I saw that question, and I saw that question was for me. And candidly, it was a topic which for a lot of years I didn't want to talk about, because I felt like when I talked, I should just be talking about accomplishments and career. It's like, why do I have to talk about how I balance my family? Why is my husband not talking about it? It felt unfair. But I feel like at this stage, I see enough questions around it that it's important. Like, it's an important topic, and we need to talk about it. So yeah, so I'm happy to share my experiences. I would say that you can have it all. You have to be careful with your definition of having it all. Having it all is a personal definition, and I think people will make different choices at different times in your life. But when I look at my career, I think through sequencing or through whatever, I feel like at this point very satisfied with the way my life has turned out. And in order to do that, I would say a few things have worked out in my favor. So through circumstance, there was a time where I had a difficult set of family circumstances, and I learned to outsource a lot of things and let go of a lot of expectations. And once I outsourced it, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Why would I not continue to outsource things even as my life changed in a way and it became more balanced? So I actually tell women, consider outsourcing things as a fundamental investment in your career, and just go ahead and do it. Like, invest 30% of your income in it, or your family's income in it, and you'll get the outcomes. You still do the executive management, but you don't have to do the grungy work. So I would say that kind of worked out. And then the other thing is, over time, I've proactively sought workplaces and also tried to create a workplace which is flexible and which is empowering. And it's always a work in progress. So again, choose your workplace smartly. You don't have to put up with a lot of things. There is a shortage of talent. Like IIT women, you are an incredibly talented group, and so you don't have to compromise, right? So keep seeking out, keep networking, find a good workplace. And I agree, I think you said who, marry well or wealth. There was something from earlier today. Having a supportive family is helpful. Engage them. So I would say for me, it's been like a supportive family, and then having outsourcing, as well as proactively seeking good workplaces. But then also, as we grow, as you guys grow as leaders, or you are leaders, create those workplaces yourself.
All right. Okay, so for you, Kumar.
Yes.
How many women do you have on your team? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Because I already said statistics don't matter, so we are blowing the rules on this panel. Kidding aside, so I have 3 direct reports who are women, and in my entire team, probably about 25 to 30%.
Are you happy with that statistic?
I'm not so sure that I've looked at it as statistics. We have had a hard time even getting there, frankly. It's taken a lot of effort and deliberate effort to make sure that we have a diverse pool of people in the team. Especially at higher levels, it is not very easy to find women in technology in leadership positions. It's just the demographics almost work against you, and biases work against you, and hiring practices work against you, and then women don't apply, like you said, all of the above, and it is not easy. And again, frankly, diverse candidates are in high demand as well, because the whole valley is striving to achieve the same outcomes. So for all of these reasons, it has not been easy, but we do a lot of different things. I work at Adobe, and we do a lot of different things. Sometimes fairly simple things, but symbolically they go a long way. So for example, in any interviewing panel, we make sure that there is at least one diverse person interviewing the people who are being interviewed, so that they have a welcoming environment, and they get an impression of Adobe that this is a welcoming place. You know, it's these the impressions candidates carry emotionally are way more powerful than just the position or the money. So we do a lot of these things where it is not just a show, but it is a genuine effort to make sure that we make it a welcoming environment.
Okay, all right. So I have, because I think the time is running out, I have one last question for each one of you, and then I'm going to summarize what we learned here. I want each one of you to give one action that you think we can take it in our work as everyone and work lives to reduce this gap. And Prakash?
Sponsor women, whether you are, when you have the ability in a leadership position to sponsor somebody to bring up in the leadership position, Sponsorship is different from mentorship, and many don't know the difference. That's the biggest thing that we can do, because then the role models form and the network effect takes over.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because the most decisions about you are being made when you're not there. So the mentorship is not going to help you much. It's the sponsor that's going to help you. I totally agree. How about you, Smita?
I would say make diversity and inclusion a part of your practice. So, so I'm sure some of you go and, you survey what's happening in competition. Some of you have hours set aside to talk to customers, think about the team. Make this a topic which you set aside time for, and you will figure it out. Like, you're all really smart people, you will figure it out, but make it a practice which you consciously think about and you invest in. And there are lots of tools available. Nothing is perfect, but there are lots of tools available. So it has to be a priority. I will say one thing, I'm looking at this conference, and the number of women speakers I'm seeing across the conference is actually pretty small, right? So I'm just going to say, like, if you were organizing this conference and you're thoughtful about it, you would say, why don't we have more women panelists? Let us seek them out. And I keep hearing arguments like, there's a talent pool problem. I'm sorry, there isn't a talent pool problem. There's a progression problem over here. Even a 1% difference in progression rate leads to like 30, 40% difference in the leadership representation at the top. So everyone has to be thoughtful and start being practical about it.
Okay, all right. How about you, Kumar?
A lot of things along the lines of, I completely agree with Smita in terms of being thoughtful about D&I and inculcating that in all the processes that you have. In the way you construct interview panels, I gave that example. Another thing we had put in practice in my team was we never hired anybody, never filled a position unless at least one diverse candidate was interviewed for that position. Either a woman or an African American or some minority of some sort. There was always a consideration for a minority or diverse candidate before we filled any position.
Okay.
So things of this sort, which are small, they make a difference because it changes the attitude. It changes the attitude for the recruiters. It changes the attitude for the hiring managers, that they have to seek somebody out. Even if it feels like an artificial effort, it leads to better conclusions in the end. And it's amazing how many times through that effort, we actually found better candidates who were diverse because we were seeking them out.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, and I will add one more thing that is a favorite program of mine at Adobe, which relates to the sponsorship idea that Vikas talked about. We have a program called Women's Executive Shadow Program.
Okay.
And it's an opportunity for junior women at Adobe to shadow executives and to observe and to learn and to interact and to figure out how things work when they are 3 levels above where they are today.
Okay.
4 levels sometimes. And it is one of my most favorite programs. I sponsor this at least a couple of times every year, where somebody shadows me for a day and a half, 2 days, in everything that I do. The way I make decisions, the way I conduct meetings, the way I'm conducting one-on-ones. Yeah, they become two-on-one, but right? And it's a fascinating experience for them. And there is always and it's very interesting to observe what their observations are when they come in first, when they have not done this before, and then a day and a half later when we have a wrap-up and what they have learned and observed, and it's an eye-opening experience. And that goes back to the idea of sponsorship, which is, it's small thing, but it's an observation opportunity that otherwise never happens, because you're never attending any meetings that are 4 levels above you.
Yes.
And just being a fly on the wall, observing how things work.
Okay, so I just summarize what I heard was sponsor. So women, find a sponsor, and men, please sponsor women. Diversity and inclusion be part of your process, norm, and the good stuff that you're doing at Adobe. I mean, every company needs to replicate it. I have few of my own, so just be conscious about the unconscious bias. Call out mansplaining when you see it. Okay, please, all right? Whenever you see it, if any woman is getting office housework, please call it out. And no office housework to women. And then for women, women should not think that the task cannot be done by women, because it can be. And I'll quote a famous woman in the world. She's from The Incredibles. I'm assuming you've watched The Incredibles. It's the Elastigirl, and says, leave the saving of the world to the men. Don't. Okay? All right, well, thank you very much. A warm applause for the panelists. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you.